Rugby League Backchat is sponsored by TotalRL.com. Hello and welcome to this week's Backchat from the Pit Sports Bar in Leeds, and as ever a colourful and chatty, we hope, panel with us today. We've got Martyn Sadler from League Express newspapers. We've also got Matthew Shaw, who's the editor-in-chief of Total Rugby League magazine, and very pleased to say that we've got Mick Hogan as well, who's the chairman of Newcastle Thunder. We wanted to say Newcastle Knights, but it is Newcastle Thunder. But the ambition's there to be as big as the Knights one day as well. Before we start, can we start with an apology? I think this programme back in February and March and through to April questioned whether Steve McNamara had the wherewithal to lead Catalan to glory. He clearly does, so we apologise for any doubts we might have had. Congratulations to Steve McNamara. And that's where we'll start the weekend, the semi-finals, the Challenge Cup semi-finals. What a fantastic occasion. Martyn Sadler, we'll start with you first of all. I mean, just having a double header. Forget the games, the quality of the games, a double header. The occasion itself was terrific at Bolton.
I thought it was magnificent, and of course, sellout crowd, obviously, that helps enormously, as does a shock result. And who would have believed that Catalans would be winning 27-0 at half-time? Actually, the half-time scoreline was probably more striking than the full-time scoreline, wasn't it? 35-16 Saints did come back a bit in the second half, but it's interesting, you've just apologised to Steve McNamara. I got my apologies in early in League Express this week. I beat you to it, because I actually wrote a piece saying, you know, that Steve, I think Steve is a great coach, and I've thought that for a long time. I've thought it, you know, for most of the time I've known Steve, and Steve just, I think, confirmed that. I think it was probably his best ever result as a coach. And you know, they can. Who can now say that they won't win the Challenge Cup? I mean, Warrington obviously will say they won't. And their result against Leeds wasn't a shock, but it was a shock scoreline. I think 48-12. Nobody would have imagined that of Leeds. Everybody thinks Leeds are a team that rise to the big occasion. They signally failed to do so on Sunday. So, you know, what do we make of it? I think it's going to be a great Challenge Cup final, and you know, I think the hashtag is, as we said, let's fill Wembley, and I think you know, that's something we all want to see.
Mick, you've seen some obviously the big events in Newcastle with the Magic Weekend this last few years. Is this the way forward for semi-finals, for the Challenge Cup as a whole, to try and spice it up, to make it feel like big events are taking place?
Very much so. I think Martyn hit the key word there when he said sellout. As soon as you hear sellout, you want to watch it or you want to get involved in it. Now, you can't get involved by going to the game because it is a sellout, but you want to watch it on TV. And I thought it came across fantastically well. The games themselves, you know, weren't that close, probably weren't that exciting, but it's just this sense of occasion that says, do you know what, this is a grand old tournament, this is a big event, and this is something you need to be getting involved in and watching. So do you think, Matthew, there'll be a push now to make this a regular thing, the semi-final double-headers?
There should be, definitely, and whether you take it to the same venue in Bolton, which I think was a really good venue, or whether you take it to various different grounds, I would also encourage, actually, maybe looking at doing more like this, maybe even the quarter-final, maybe having another Magic weekend type event, but for the Challenge Cup. I don't see why we shouldn't do that. I think the sport lacks events. The events that we have are very successful. Let's get more of them. Why not?
Just from a personal anecdotal point of view, and no scientific evidence in this at all, but I took 4 people to the game as fans. A couple who've no interest in sport whatsoever came to watch a rugby league game for the very first time. My daughter and her boyfriend, again, you know, only a peripheral interest in rugby league. The couple who've never been to rugby league before are going to Wembley. You know, they want to see how this ends now. They love the occasion, love the interaction with the fans. They want to go to Wembley to see how it ends. You know, we've got 2 recruits in rugby league, and my daughter and her son are going to Salford. The next Salford game, I think it's Widnes. They looked it up while they were there. Let's go to Salford, because they live quite close to the Salford ground. I'm sure that's what events do, isn't it? It brings in the people who are not necessarily interested in rugby league into the fold.
David, I'm sure you've got 90,000 friends, so all you need to do is get them all going. No, tremendous. And you know, people, it's a funny thing about our sport, as we've said, you know, a lot of people go to it for the first time, not being sure what to expect. My granddaughter had a similar experience earlier this year. You know, we took her for the first time to a game between Wakefield and Wigan, and she's 11 years old, and she absolutely loved it, and obviously wants to go again, and that's tremendous. But the funny thing is that people go to rugby league games with a preconception that it might not be very exciting, yet they find it is. So somehow the message isn't getting out to the wider general public, is it? Because you know, if it weren't so, people would know it was going to be good.
Yeah.
And we don't seem to be able to get that message out.
The lesson has to be for clubs, though. For me, the clubs have to realise that they've got to make their own games events.
Yeah.
I go to so many games at so many different clubs, and there's nothing happening. You get to the ground, there's nothing happening outside the ground. There's nothing going on inside the ground. So you wouldn't, when you try and take someone there, what are you selling to them? You're selling them Rugby League. They might not, if they don't like Rugby League, what else are they going for? The grounds and the clubs that do the best at attracting new audiences are the ones that have things going on, that make events. Look all the way back to the Bulls when they were at the peak. It was an occasion, wasn't it? It was a party. I don't see that enough from clubs anymore.
But that's why Toronto have been successful, isn't it? Because they've been able to do it.
One of the striking features of the semi-final, from again just looking around, was the number of neutral shirts, and I don't think you normally see that in a semi-final, neutral shirts. But neutral fans are drawn to it because of the occasion. It's now a case of, can we sell the final to neutral fans? I mean, what do the RFL need to do to make sure that we fill Wembley Stadium or get close to it?
I think they've just got to look at what they did for the semi-final and see if that can be repeated. I think the RFL they get bashed a lot, but I think to fill a semi-final on the second or third week of the summer holidays, when one of the teams didn't bring the most amount of travelling fans in Catalan, I think is huge credit to them. So they've just got to see, what they did at the semi-final and see if we can replicate that for the final. I think the challenge that the RFL and the sport has now is that it has so many, I think, big days out. People hark back to the sort of 70s and 80s and say, we used to put 80, 90, 100,000 people in Wembley for the Challenge Cup final. We did, but actually we didn't have a grand final, we didn't have a magic weekend. No. The fan couldn't go to Catalan, he couldn't go to London. Toronto now. A Super League fan next year may be able to go to Toronto, London, Toulouse, Catalan. You've never had so many options. You've never had so many potential big days out. So that's the challenge, is that if we don't grow the overall audience of Rugby League, what will happen is the more events we put on, we're just moving the same people around, and you know what, we're probably not going to fill Wembley.
Strikes me that we probably need to start marketing Rugby League to millionaires who can afford to actually go to all these games.
Or to a London audience. I mean,
absolutely.
Rugby Union. I mean, you're involved with Rugby Union as well, aren't you, with Newcastle Falcons? And they do really well with their Twickenham events, especially, but with their Wembley events. And that's because they're marketing to an audience within a day's drive, within an afternoon's drive of Wembley Stadium. Does Rugby League need to be doing more of that rather than just depending on what you say, the same old faces?
Well, we certainly need to be getting a southeastern audience. I mean, the strange thing is that Sky always tend to say that a big part of their television audience is actually based in southeast England. And when we've held events, we had the New Zealand test at the Olympic Stadium, didn't we, in East London, and got 50-odd thousand people there, which is a pretty respectable turnout for that sort of a game. So the audience is there potentially if we want to promote it. But the key thing is being able to generate a feeling that this is a must-see game. The Challenge Cup final is a must-see game. The Catalans are a unique club, really, in terms of, they're playing in a competition that's essentially a British competition. But, they're a unique club, and get to Wembley, because if you don't, you'll miss this opportunity to see what's really going to be a very special occasion.
Yeah.
And the more we can get that message out, the better it will be.
I think the big test also is how many Catalan supporters come over. I was talking to one of the French journalists on the Saturday before the game, who said that if it was in Paris, they'd take 20,000, no problem, to any stadium in Paris. But to get to London at this time of year is very, very expensive from where they are. You can't just jump on a coach because it takes you 2 days to drive there. So, I mean, what kind of response are you expecting from the Catalan supporters?
It's a really hard one to answer, Dave. I think it's fair to say the RFL will have alarm bells ringing. I don't think there's any doubt about that. However positive Ralph Rimmer was trying to be after the game, it is a challenge for the RFL as well as Catalans. As for the fans, it's a big ask to ask fans to go down there August bank holiday. It's going to cost a lot of money. They've probably already booked the holidays. No one were expecting Catalans to be at Wembley this year. Certainly the Dragons fans weren't, the way they were playing at the start of the year. So I can't imagine they've put money behind to try and save up for this. I think it's a real concern. I think what we do need to do with the sport is tap into the French audience that we have in England, specifically in London. There are a lot of French people living in London. We need to try and tap into them and hope that they can make up for maybe the shortfall in the Catalans fans who travel from Perpignan.
And not just French, but Catalans people as well.
Well, there's almost a dichotomy there, isn't it? Because if you're a Catalan, you're not necessarily French.
You're
not necessarily Catalan.
It's a very strange thing politically.
They even speak
actually.
different languages, don't they?
They do indeed. But there's got to be a significant Catalan population in London as well, you would imagine. I mean, I obviously don't have
The
any
Barcelona
statistics on
market,
that.
let's tap in.
Well, indeed, why not? Why not? There's a strong, Catalans movement, and let's give them something to shout about if they're really serious about it. Absolutely tremendous. But the other unfortunate thing about the Challenge Cup final is that Euston Station is going to be closed that weekend.
That's
which
not
is
trouble the Catalan fans.
It's a problem for Warrington fans, isn't it?
Well, I mean, we're not helped. I mean, let's not go down this road, but we're not helped by transport, are we? The station at Bolton was closed on Saturday.
Really?
It was a bus service. The M62 closes. It's like the transport gods are against rugby league. But let's not go into that. I mean, it's going to be a good final. It's going to be a good final, and we kind of, Wembley is the mecca. But if we've got this issue of it costing so much to go down to London, for your average rugby league fan, not just your Catalan supporter, do we look again at where the venue is? Do we look again at maybe moving the Challenge Cup final away from Wembley? Could we do that?
I think we should look at it, but I think the event should stay in London because I think it gives us, a national profile. It's where most of the newspaper editors and the media still are. But you've got some tremendous stadiums in London now that are around about 55 to 60,000, which I think is the right size for the Challenge Cup final. The new Tottenham Stadium that will be coming on stream sort of later this year is going to be absolutely magnificent. Arsenal is fantastic. They're all incredibly well connected, probably better well connected on the tube system than Wembley is. So I think we should be looking at other venues in London, because for me, Wembley, as impressive as it is, it's just the wrong size now. It's 90,000. It is too big, and it did lose that mystique when the
it's not the sense that we're throwing the towel in by saying that. I mean,
we're not throwing the towel in. You're looking at adapting to survive and adapting to prosper, aren't you?
Yeah, but the thing is that the Challenge Cup final has been associated with Wembley for so long that I think it's
but
part
the original
of the magic is
the
that it's at
pioneers in
Wembley.
29 said, let's go to Wembley because this will be great for the game. That's not to say that's it now. Surely the pioneers of 2018 have got to say, well, what's great for the game now? What would be good for the game now? And Wembley might not be the answer. It might be, but it might not be the answer.
Well, I just don't think it would be the same anywhere else, Dave. That's the trouble. And you could move to White Hart Lane or Emirates Stadium, for example. And there is going to be a bit of a problem with Wembley. You can't deny that, because of course it looks as though it's being sold to an American who's probably going to bring an American football team to play there regularly, and that might conceivably make it awkward. Both in terms of negotiating a new contract to play at Wembley and in terms of the availability of the stadium. So, you can't say it would never move, but I'd be really reluctant to see it, particularly given that there's a statue there now of, 5 of the great players who played at Wembley. Well, but you wouldn't want to, would you?
No. I agree with Martyn. I
was going to say, we're, I mean, all due respect to us, we're in the old Gits camp, and you're not quite there yet, but you're the younger generation. So, what is there a lure to Wembley that makes the occasion bigger because it's at Wembley?
Absolutely. I think it's the Holy Grail for me. It is the Holy Grail. I think I remember watching the Challenge Cup, and obviously I don't have as much history knowledge as you guys do, but everything about it is centred around the fact it's at Wembley. You get the trip to Wembley. The fans love it because they are going to Wembley. I don't think if you try and sell it to the fans of Warrington and Newcastle, and you're going to the Emirates, that appeal, there's that charm about it as much. I think Rugby League has changed so much over the years, some for the good, some not for the good. I think this is one thing we need to keep as a regular thing, and have Wembley as part of Rugby League's calendar.
Just make me and Martyn feel good and tell us, what was your first Wembley memory, your first Challenge Cup memory?
Oh my goodness. I remember Marcus Bai at Leeds having a shocker and giving a pass away in his own in-goal.
When was that then?
No. 2000 and early 2000s.
You
know what? Thinking about it, I don't even know if it was the final.
I'm not even sure if he's allowed to have a glass of wine.
but when you talk about Wembley, I mean, I remember going back a lot longer than that to the early 1970s. I was hitchhiking around Yugoslavia at the time.
As you do.
I came across a very small, dusty little
We've
village.
got an idea for a documentary.
I actually came across a very small, dusty little village with 2 or 3 kids kicking a ball around, and they'd put the word Wembley on the side of this dusty old pitch, you know, and you sort of thought your heart swelled with pride, really, because you sort of thought, well, you know, here I am, an Englishman going through their country, but obviously Wembley means such a lot to these young kids who were.
But can't we
playing
just
football.
say this is the Challenge Cup, the world's oldest knockout trophy? We've been playing for it since 1896. We've got the Lancashire Trophy that's been awarded since 1946. There's enough tradition without the ground being brought into context.
Correct. I thought when the final was moved to Cardiff and to Edinburgh, I don't think it lost that much.
No.
I think the biggest damage to the event is if we turn on in 2.5 weeks' time and we see tens of thousands of empty red seats.
Yeah.
What that says to me is this is not a must-see event.
Yeah.
When actually all of us here, you know, to us it's a must-see event. To everybody within the Rugby League community, it's a must-see event. But there are so many other events, as I mentioned earlier now, and I just think that people are now. It used to be the one big day out for the Rugby League fan.
Yeah.
There's so many of them now.
Yeah.
So
and
I think we've got to adapt.
If you take it to, I mean, we were talking about 2007. That sold as many as it did, despite Catalan being there, because it was the new Wembley. People wanted to go to see the new Wembley.
Correct.
People wanted to go to Edinburgh and Cardiff,
Yeah.
and they might want to go to Tottenham. 50,000 went to the London Stadium because it was where the Olympics were at. You get that one-off hit, don't you, by changing it? Anyway, we're going to come back with a lot more chat in the second part, but that was part 1 of this week's Back Chat, and we'll see you in a few minutes' time. Rugby League Back Chat is sponsored by TotalRL.com. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of this week's Back Chat from the Pit Sports Bar in Leeds. A lively panel with us as ever. Matthew Shaw, who's the Editor-in-Chief of the Rugby League World magazine, Martyn Sadler from League Express newspapers, and also Mick Hogan, who is the Chairman of Newcastle Thunder. We're going to be chatting a lot more about Newcastle in the third part and, you know, all this expansion stuff that's quite exciting in the game at the moment. But this week, the 8th start. We've got rid of last weekend, Challenge Cup. This week, the 8th start. Matt, I'll start with you first of all. Are Leeds in trouble?
I answered this question a couple of weeks ago and I gave a one-word answer, and that was no.
Change your mind?
A little bit. On the last couple of performances, I mean, watching them against Salford and against Warrington, they were woeful. They were absolutely woeful. I've seen a lot of the Championship this year. I think Toulouse, if Leeds play like that, Toulouse can give them a real fright. Jonathan Ford at halfback will be rubbing his hands together, as will Mark Corella on the last 2 defensive performances. Leeds, defensively, were an embarrassment really against Warrington. The amount of tackles they're dropping off, the amount of times they're just not doing the basics of bending the back and just putting the effort in to make the tackle. I don't care who you're playing at. If you're playing any team that has some quality in them, you will struggle if you defend like that. So I am a little bit worried for Leeds.
The thing about Leeds is, for so long they've risen to the occasion, haven't they? Into the big occasion. They've been known as the big occasion team. But yet they just didn't do it on Sunday. And it wasn't just that they didn't rise to the occasion. They seemed to fall below the occasion, really. I don't think I've seen a Leeds team play in such a big match and play so badly for as long as I can remember, Dave, to be frank about it. So, you know, they play Toulouse on Saturday, and that's a dangered game for them, because, you know, if they did lose to Toulouse by any stretch of the imagination, they'd be in trouble straight away.
Yeah.
So it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that they could, you know, go down. And, you know, they need to tighten up that defence. It's just not happened over the last few weeks, and if it doesn't happen soon, it's not, you know, they're going to be struggling.
It's the first couple of games, really, because it could go either way for Leeds. It was like last time when they were in this position, they just walked the middle eights and there were never any danger. They hardly broke sweat. They win the first 2 games. You think that might happen again, or it's going to take a big change in attitude to get there?
I still think they're going to be all right. I still think they've got enough big name players to get them over the line, and I think within the middle eights as well, whichever clubs get 4 home games over just having 3 home games, I think is quite significant. Leeds are one of the clubs that has 4 home games, and I think they'll be okay. I think Widnes and Salford are going to find it a bit tougher. But I know everybody's sort of looking at Toronto to lose. Can they come up even London? I still think the 4 Super League clubs, because they've been playing at that level for a full season, have got to be favourites to stay up.
But the 3 of the Super League clubs have got a bit of a lift, haven't they? Jackson Hastings arrives at Salford. He already looks magic in the brief spell we saw him. Liam Finn, who of course is joining your side next year at Widnes. He could make a big difference to that Widnes side, couldn't he? Hull KR, a couple of signings as well. And Leeds haven't really signed anyone, and they're just going into it on the downward. Everyone else seems to be coming.
Well, they've signed Jordan Thompson, haven't they, from Lee? Who's a pretty solid player.
Yeah, Don Crosby.
Don Crosby as well.
Yeah.
So solid players without being, match winners, I suppose. But maybe they're just the sort of players they need at the moment.
Yeah.
And anything that can tighten up that defence, because that defence looks so vulnerable on Sunday. And as Matthew says, Toulouse have some really fine attacking players. Jonathan Ford obviously being the key one, and it could really do Leeds a lot of damage.
You watch a lot of the Championship, so tell us who's the big threat. Toronto, Halifax, London, Toulouse. Can you see one of them making a big push? Toronto obviously top of the league by distance.
I think realistically the only team over the full 7 games that can compete to go up is Toronto. I think the other 3 are more than capable of winning games against Super League sides, but as Mick said, it's that consistency of playing at that intensity that will struggle. If you watch the qualifiers, normally the Championship teams, as the competition goes on, start to struggle. They pick up more injuries, the fatigue picks up, and that's where my fears are for the other 3. I think Toronto have a lot of experience at a high level, and they've got players that have played at this level before.
But they're not at the moment used to playing high-level rugby league, intense rugby league week in, week out, are they? That's the difference.
Which is where London become interesting.
Yeah.
Because London have played a lot of the top teams in the Championship, and again, it's slightly different to Super League, but they've probably had the best preparation out of the teams that they've played so far. So I think, and London are on a fantastic run of form. They're the dark horses for me.
And tonight's game, they're playing Widnes. That's the opening game of the qualifiers. That's a real big game.
Yeah,
actually, for both sides.
They're not going to be perturbed by the plastic pitch, are they?
Because they're playing one.
Yeah.
So,
you mentioned the recruitment as well. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from the individuals that these clubs have signed, but Harrison Hansen, Craig Hall, Ben Crooks, they've all played in a side that finished 6th in the Championship. They've not had unbelievably good seasons.
But a side that finished 6th in the Championship, but in the last few weeks has been pretty good.
Yeah,
League. I mean, it was the start of the season that spoiled Lee's season, wasn't it? Of
course, but nevertheless, they haven't signed world beaters, talented players, no doubt, who have played at this level before as well for a long time and had success. But that isn't going to strike fear into the Championship teams. And the other thing that is always the case, the sides in the Championship, probably Halifax more than anyone, they have nothing to lose. Halifax play Toronto this Sunday. What have they got to lose in that game? Toulouse go to Leeds. What have they got to lose? Widnes have everything to lose when they play London.
There's too many Toulouses here.
Widnes host London. Widnes have lost 16 games on the bounce now, I think it is. They have everything to lose. They've been building to this effectively, so there's a lot of pressure on them. At home, where it's been quite hostile as well, London go there, having picked up some fantastic results. Drew with Toulouse, beat Halifax. They picked up another really good win in there as well against Featherstone. They're on a high, and the reality is they have absolutely nothing that can go against. If they lose that game, they lose the game away to a Super League team. That isn't where their battle lies in this qualifiers campaign.
Yeah, it's we've got a big not psychological. That's entirely different. Big philosophical question here. Can the game afford a Leeds to be relegated? And how does the game look if, say, Leeds are relegated, having finished 12 points above Widnes in the current system? The irony being that the Leeds chief exec is the only one who's actually in support of the eights at the moment in the top flight.
I think anybody can go down, as you've seen with Bradford.
But if Super League lost Leeds, would that be damaging to the game, having already lost Bradford?
Potentially, yeah. But I think what it would show is the strength in the leagues below, and we've seen some good investment in the Championship and clubs themselves, attracting investors What it shows now is that there's a real pressure from the Championship coming up and putting pressure on the teams at the bottom end of Super League.
Yeah.
Whether the system's right or not, I think that's another debate.
We were talking about maybe a return to the top 5 playoffs, you know? And if we were returning to a top 5 playoffs this year, Leeds still have a chance of making the grand final. You know, look, going into the end of the season. As it is, Leeds have a chance of being relegated. I mean, that's how the structure can alter the whole situation.
Actually, one good thing about Leeds being relegated would probably be the return of the Leeds-Bradford derby, wouldn't it? Because, you know, in the Championship, wouldn't that be ironic, really? But so I think Bradford fans would probably welcome that one, I would have thought, and even if Leeds fans wouldn't. But
if you subscribe to the idea that there are 5, maybe 6 big clubs in Super League, Leeds being one of them, and Bradford were another, the fact that we've lost one, can we afford to lose another? The game being in the situation it's in at the moment.
Well, that's just how it works out, isn't it? And you've got to say that you've got to be able to afford to lose teams, because if you've got a promotion relegation system, you never know really who you're going to lose and who's going to come up. So, you know, it's just one of those things. But I mean, London, we were talking about London a few minutes ago, and I think the fascinating thing about them is that even a few weeks ago I would have said that they'd be the ones to drop out of the top 4 in the Championship, because they look to have the hardest fixture list of all, you know, with 5 or 6 games to go.
Yeah.
I thought they had the hardest fixture list, and I thought Lee would overtake them, but they've just kept one step ahead of Lee. I think Lee were unlucky not to get there. But it's been a remarkable season for London, and Danny Ward, I think, has been absolutely outstanding. I know a lot of people, perhaps including me, when Danny got the job to coach London, we weren't quite sure, you know, how he would go, but he's been tremendous, and you know, their season has been outstanding. The sad thing for them is, though, that they still can't draw a crowd consistently above 1,000 in Ealing, and that's the disappointing thing. And that comes back to Rugby League's relatively low profile.
Yeah, and I mean, if London go up, there's all kinds of problems with the stadium, isn't there? Because it's not Super League standard.
Not at the minute, but they do have plans for the other side. So where the complex is, the other side where the dugouts are, there is a plan for. I think it's a stand of about 1,400.
Temporary.
I think
semi-permanent.
I think maybe even it might be permanent moving forward. I don't know, but they've got a plan for that. You are right. As it stands, it's not quite ready, and the club probably not quite ready in terms of crowds. I think below that though, they're doing a fantastic job. One of the remarkable things that Danny's done this year is he was obviously part of the youth setup, and he's built his way up the ranks there. The amount of players that London are bringing through and playing, Dan Hindmarsh has done it this year. He's been a revelation for them in the back row. He's been absolutely outstanding. James Meadows at the start of the year was fantastic. These are all London products. And people want to say that, what does London do for the game? How many players are they bringing through? They are bringing through some really, really talented players right now that will cause a stay in the qualifiers for me.
Yeah. So that's the middle 8s. What about the top? What about the top 8? I mean, is that a done deal in terms of the top 4 now? From your point of view, is it?
I think if Huddersfield get beat this weekend, then it's pretty much done and dusted.
Yeah.
It's been a bit unfortunate this year that the top 4 seem to have broken away, and it's already almost sorted itself out.
That's more or less been standard ever since 2015, hasn't it? It's often been the case.
We've always had a couple of couple of teams who've got in there and go, we're over the line, we're not going to get relegated.
That's right, and it goes back to. For me at least, and I wrote about it this week, that, you know, Marwan Kukash had a proposal that would have made the Super 8s 10 times more exciting than I think they're going to be. And that was that, you know, after 30 games, the semi-finals, the top 4 semi-finals would be contested by the top 3 teams, plus the 4th team, which would be the best performing team over the next 7 weeks. So that, you know, every team that's in the top 8 would have a chance, if it performed well over the next 7 weeks, to be the 4th team, even if they're starting, you know, like, you know, Huddersfield, Catalans, and Hull and so forth, even if they're starting, you know, several points behind the top 4 at the moment. And I think that would be so much more exciting, and I really wish that the clubs had taken Marwan's idea on board, you know. And it would have transformed the competition.
The semi-finals, the Challenge Cup semi-finals, could have a big impact on these now, couldn't they? Because, you know, Warrington have suddenly got a Challenge Cup final to look forward to, but they've still a chance of finishing second, and a home tie, and but how much of the Challenge Cup distract them and blah blah blah. And St Helens now, I mean, it's an odd situation for St Helens. A couple of wins and they've got the League Leaders Shield. They're already in the top 4. They're already one game away from Old Trafford, but they've got a season to resurrect now.
We're only the same for Castleford though. Last year, they had to win 2 games, I think, in the Super 8 to firm the League Leaders Shield up, and then all they were focused on was the playoff semi-final.
Yeah.
So it's a similar situation. Yes, they didn't have the semi-final defeat that Saints have had, and the banner of it. But you mentioned Warrington finishing second potentially. Could also finish 5th yet.
Yeah.
The way Huddersfield are playing, if Huddersfield were to win at Saints, would I put it past them? No, not the way they're playing, and not after what Saints have gone through this week. They can be right up there. If Warrington were to lose to Catalans, which isn't beyond the realms of possibility, there's 4 points in it, 6 games left. They've got to play each other. I don't think this top 4 race is quite finished yet, if I'm honest.
Right. I mean, it's not a great position for Saints to be in because they'd rather be at Wembley. But in terms of the compensation is now that they can win those 2 games. They've played, I think they've only used 22, 23 players all season. And so there's going to be some tired players in there. They're going to have the chance to rest those ahead of those semi-finals, aren't they? That might help them.
They are, but when you get to the business end of the season, you really want your best players out on the park on a regular basis. So, I think you may well see 1 or 2 players rested and rotated over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. But then, even if they've got the League Leaders Shield tied up, I would expect them to be putting their best 17 out for the last 2 games of the qualifiers, and then getting that run and that momentum going into the semi-final, and then for Saints, hopefully a grand final.
Yeah.
The really unpredictable thing, of course, is what the psychological effect of the semi-final defeat will be on St Helens, because it was a resounding defeat, wasn't it? It wasn't just by 1 or 2 points. It was a significant, easy victory, really, for Catalans. And you wonder whether that will shatter the confidence of St Helens. I suppose we'll find out when they play Huddersfield on Friday night. But you don't quite know what that sort of a defeat does to a team, do you? And it might, and not just what it does to them, but what it does to other potential opponents of theirs when the big games come round at the end of the season. The Catalans have shown how to beat St Helens, so are other clubs, Wigan, Warrington, and whoever, Castleford perhaps. I mean, it'd be fascinating, wouldn't it, if the first semi-final was a game between St Helens and Castleford, bearing in mind last year's semi-final was Castleford v St Helens, and Cass just held on to win that game with a drop goal by Luke Gale. How would St Helens fancy facing Castleford in that game with everything at stake? It would be really interesting, I think.
Justin Holbrook has a big challenge on his hands now, more in managing this team. As you mentioned, you think he's only used 22, 23 players. They are going to be fatigued. It's a long season. To ask a small band of players like that to play so many games is hard. He really has to look after his players now, make sure that they are fully fit for those playoff semi-finals.
2 words, just 2 words, because we're right out. Grand finalists.
St Helens and Castleford.
St Helens and Wigan.
Saints and Wigan.
Saints and Wigan. Wouldn't that be a story? Sean Wayne's last game in charge, a grand final, possibly with victory over St Helens. Wow. Anyway, let's not rewrite the future. We'll be talking more about the history in the 3rd and final part of Back Chat in just a few moments' time. Rugby League Back Chat is sponsored by TotalRL.com. Hello and welcome back to part 3 of this week's Back Chat from the Pit Sports Bar in Leeds, and a lively panel with us today. We've got Matt Shaw, who's the Editor-in-Chief of Rugby League World. We've also got Martyn Sadler from League Express newspapers, and we've also got Mick Hogan, who's the Chairman of Newcastle Thunder. And if you're a certain vintage, like myself and Martyn, although I'm a bit younger than him, and you've got a very good eyesight, then you probably spent the first 2 parts looking at Mick and going, isn't that Captain Thunder? Because I think you were Captain Thunder at the old Gateshead Thunder back in the day, weren't you?
Vicious rumour, Dave. Vicious
rumour. It's not true.
It's not true. As our friend in America would say, it's fake news.
Oh, right. Okay, fair enough. Well, we'll let that drop then. But that's disappointing. It's very disappointing. Newcastle Thunder, where are you at the moment as a club? On the periphery of a promotion push at the moment, unlikely this year. But what is the ambition of the club? Where are you at in terms of achieving that ambition?
The ambition is to get to Super League. We stated that when Newcastle Rugby Limited, the Falcons, bought the Thunder back in 2014. We're not going to put a time frame on that because I think it's difficult to predict how long these things take. But if and when we get there, we'll have done it the right way. We'll have done it through 2 promotions on the field, but we'll have also done it off the field as well, because I think to survive and prosper in Super League, you need to make the investment off the field as well, whether that's facilities, your junior development, your marketing, your community, to build up the crowds.
Just relate the history of Rugby League, the more recent history of Rugby League. So there was Gateshead Thunder, wasn't there, which you were involved in?
Yeah.
Kath Hetherington was involved in as well. They then kind of merged with Hull, but there was a new setup in Newcastle, wasn't there? And that has become what is now Newcastle Thunder.
Yeah, Gateshead reformed back in 2001, went through several incarnations, had one really good year in 2008 when it won the equivalent of League One and got up into the Championship, hit some money troubles, as a lot of clubs have seemed to do over the years. Survived, literally clung on by the fingernails through the work of some fantastic volunteers. And then back in 2014, the owner of Newcastle Falcons, Seymour Curdy, has bought the club. So Newcastle Rugby Limited now own the Thunder, and they're part of the family at Kingston Park.
Yeah.
How committed is Seymour Curdy to the Thunder, Mick? Is he as committed, for example, as he is to the Falcons?
Yeah, he is. Seymour just wants to see rugby of both codes prosper. If you ask Seymour what his ambitions are, he wants to see a centre for rugby in the North East of both codes, men, women, old and young, all coming together, playing at the facility, supporting it, just getting involved in rugby. And he's openly said if he wins 1 or 2 trophies along the way, that's fantastic, but that's not the reason he's in it. And I think if you heard that from most people, you might be a bit sceptical, but if you meet the guy, he wants to leave a genuine legacy for both codes in a part of the world that is synonymous with football, and both rugby league and rugby union have to battle hard to attract people in to watch the sport and to play this sport.
What kind of crowds are you getting?
We're averaging just about 1,000 this year. That is boosted by the Magic Weekend. So when we had Bradford, we had over 4,000. But if you compare that to where we were at Gateshead 4 years ago, when crowds were around the 200 mark, it's significantly higher.
Yeah.
We run a corporate hospitality programme now as well. The level of sponsorship we're getting has increased. You put any club in a decent, I think, facility, like we've got the stadium up at Kingston Park, it attracts people in.
Yeah.
And we have invested in the team a bit more. We've invested off the field, so we're playing perhaps more attractive rugby than they played in the final couple of years at Gateshead. So it is pulling lots of new people in.
Most people say that the progress of a club, right from the bottom, can be the slowest, but the most important. What sort of foundations have been put in place behind the scenes that we've maybe not seen over the last 2 or 3 years?
I think it's a lot of foundations. We've now got 11 clubs in the area, excluding the student game that play rugby league, of which 8 of them have junior sections. So we have our own North East junior leagues at 3 different age levels. And what that's doing is it's getting a lot more people involved in the sport. There's 1,300 registered players in the North East, and that's up 20% in the last 2 years. Now you look at not just in rugby league, any other sport over the last 2 years have probably seen a decline in participants. So we've sort of booked the trend up in the North East. It's been a lot of hard work by a lot of people. What that's leading to now is we're one of 3 non-Super League sides in the RFL Academy. And we still lose more than we win, but if you take the game at the weekend against Castleford with 6-7 minutes to go, there's 4 points in the game. Now, that's the best kids in the North East taking on the best kids from Castleford. 5-10 years ago, that would have been 80, 90, even 100-0. We're now within a score or 2 of them. And you're even seeing those players come through to the first team. So 4 of our academy players this year have made their debut for the Thunder in the first team. So it's slow but consistent and steady gains. And if we are going to be successful in the future, we need 30-40% of that team to be North East lads.
I mean, Newcastle's example is, and you look at Coventry as well, we talked about them recently, about the good jobs they're doing there with the grassroots and growing the game, fundamentally from bottom up. When we talk about expansion, these are clubs that we don't normally talk about. We get excited by Toronto, New York, that pipe dream, London, etc. But these are 2 big areas in the country, 2 large populations where rugby league is hardly known, that if we can grow those.
Absolutely. Well, both metropolitan areas, aren't they? North East, Tyne and Wear, and West Midlands and so And I think Coventry, I've been to both Coventry and Newcastle this year for games. I was there at Coventry when they played Leeds in a pre-season game, and you got the same vibe actually as you did at Newcastle. It's enthusiastic, people who are keen to see the club develop, getting quite a lot of people coming in to see the club for the first time. It's interesting that Coventry have recently started getting some decent results and so on. They're obviously quite a bit behind Newcastle Thunder at the moment in terms of their development, but places like this are really vital for rugby league. If we're going to expand, throughout the country, we've got to do it in big population areas. Yeah. And I think it's wonderful to see both clubs doing. Well, I mean,
you say you're not ready yet, but in the mood we're in rugby league, anything could happen in the next 2 years. And if somebody comes in strategically, if Robert Elston, I'm not saying he will, but if there's a strategic plan that suddenly says, right, we've got to get the geography right, just like right at the start of Super League when they went, we've got to have London in, we've got to have Paris in. If somebody said, right, Newcastle, you've got to be in, would you? Is that something that you'd be ready for? That you're not ready for, but that's an invitation you would accept?
I don't think we would, no.
Right.
Although it's our ambition, we want to earn it the right way on the field. Now, if the game decided that it was almost going to go back to licensing and anybody could apply, then possibly we would look at it. But I wouldn't want to take a place in the Super League above some, really fantastic and traditional clubs that have been, battling hard over decades and decades trying to get into the top flight. I wouldn't want to take a sort of a free leg up past them.
Right.
If we're going to get there, we want to do it right, we want to earn it on the field, and we want to beat them on the field and prove our position.
Yeah, the facilities there remind me a lot of London, actually.
They're impressive. Yeah. I think what I like about Newcastle is what Mick's saying. They are trying to build off, and we can see that. And the junior development, I didn't realise it was as successful as it was, to be honest. But we're now seeing as well just the start of a bit more investment on the field, aren't we? Liam Finn being announced as a big signing. Maybe more to come, I don't know. But it looks to me like gradually they're just trying to base themselves in a place, build around it and build a community around it, and I can see that happening now.
The great thing is that, I think as you said in our paper this week, Mick, that next year in League One there are probably going to be no full-time teams for the first time for several years. Which means that it's going to be a much more level playing field, isn't it? And it therefore probably isn't a bad time to be making an investment in some of the best part-time players in the game that you might be trying to recruit.
Yeah, very much so. I think, over the last 3 years, clubs have effectively been chasing one promotion spot, because with Toronto, Toulouse and Bradford, and look, Bradford aren't up there this year yet, and but still, it's been, you've been trying to go for it with sort of one arm tied behind your back. I think next year, if things go the way they should and Bradford go up, there will be 2 promotion spots that people can go for. So as much as we've noticed that at Newcastle and are perhaps going to invest a bit more to try and get out of League One, I'm sure there's some other clubs are going to do it as well, and the 2 relegated teams will want to get straight back up there as well. So we don't think it's going to be easy, but I just think there's potentially, it just gives more opportunity, I think, to clubs in League One next year.
Well, it's interesting. It's one we look for. I mean, Gateshead wasn't. I mean, you were involved in Gateshead, and when we had Morris on the other week, it wasn't far away from making that surge into being an established Super League club. Have you given it another 3-4 years? Do you reckon?
Without a doubt. I mean, I went from Gateshead straight to the Falcons. I've done a couple of stints at the Falcons, and I can tell you that the average crowds we were getting at Gateshead in '99 were double that of the Falcons at the time. Now, bear in mind, the Falcons had won the championship, the Allied Dunbar Premiership 18 months earlier. But didn't have the academies behind it, didn't have the infrastructure, the facilities, so the crowds had fallen off a cliff. So I think had Gateshead, had the funding to stay in there for another couple of years, the on-field was obviously right, because we missed out on the top 5 playoffs by a point in that year. And the off-field was getting there as well.
It was one of the many examples of just missed opportunities, wasn't it, that rugby league has tended to suffer from over the years.
Yeah, the 2 best named players in Super League as well, Royston Lightning and Matthew Daylight. Remember that?
I don't think we had Royston Lightning.
Yeah, I thought you had Royston Lightning.
No, we had Matthew Daylight. And
you see, that's where memory, old memory. I'm sure Royston Lightning. I'll play a game with you or something. Anyway, go on.
Just a word. You mentioned the crowd for the game before Magic with Bradford, which is fantastic, and you've made it an event. Is there any plans, maybe, to have Newcastle extend that partnership with Magic Weekend, make it a a full weekend event as maybe even involving a bank holiday, would that be something that the fund would be keen to get involved in?
Very much so. I think if you're going to develop any sport, you need to build from the bottom up and then get the community and the grassroots in place, which we're doing and Coventry are doing. But you need big events as well, because big events inspire people. And if you can do both in a structured programme, that's what really kicks on the sport. And we've very much got a plan of that. You know, we've had Magic for 4 weekends. We'd love it to come back again next year. The city will be bidding for or has put a bid in for Rugby League World Cup in 2021. Yeah. On the rugby union side, we've done the same. You know, we were successful in getting the European finals there next May. We've had Rugby World Cup there, and you know, there's potentially, you know, we'd love to see an England game up there. So if you can have a programme of big events in rugby and you can have the grassroots as well, that's how you properly grow.
And do you find, and we kind of have this permanent chip on our shoulder, you know, rugby union, we don't want to entertain the other code, but do you find, being where you are in Newcastle, there's less of that they just see rugby and it's one or the other, there's no kind of social exclusion?
Very much so. I think the challenge for both codes in the North East is actually is football, and it's trying to get people that have such an association and a history in football to try something different other than football. And if we can do that and we can get them into either rugby league or rugby union or better both, then we will have succeeded.
I sometimes think Mike Ashley is a bit of a help in that regard, actually, because he often seems to put people off watching football in Newcastle, as far as I can see, with some of the things he gets up to.
Well, look, it's always going to be king. I mean, they got 52,000 in the championship, didn't they, when they got relegated? So we're just trying to show that, you know what, you can still do the football, but come along the rugby every now and again.
But you must be in almost a unique position alongside, well, not quite unique, alongside Gary Hetherington, in that you're, you know, in charge of two clubs. You know, you've got the Falcons that are in the Aviva Premiership, so you've got a particular insight into the comparison between the way the two codes operate, Mick. I mean, what conclusions do you draw from that? Do you think, you know, rugby league compares reasonably well in the way that it runs to rugby union, or do you think there are lots of things we could learn from the other code?
I think both codes can learn from each other. I think what you have in rugby union, and I'm sure what rugby league would love to have, is such a vibrant international game, and an international game that funds really the rest of the sport. I also think what we have within rugby union, particularly at a premiership level, is we've got a premiership competition that by and large for the last 23 years hasn't changed. It's been 12 teams or it's been 14 teams, but they play each other home and away. Playoffs are relatively new. Well, they've been in for sort of 13, 14 years now, and there's one up and one down. It's simple. The public understand it, and I think, you know, as great as rugby league's been, as innovative as it's been, at times we've changed for change's sake, and there's talk now of changing again. Well, it just puts people off. So I think that's one thing that rugby league could learn. But I think rugby union as well can learn a lot from rugby league. You know, we have a rugby union premiership now that's losing £30 million a year between the 12 clubs. Really? You know, what we have in rugby league is far, far more sustainable. And I think we've got to look at that. And you know, rugby league to me hasn't really been that adversely affected by not going out and spending money they haven't got. Quite the opposite. They've got sustainable clubs that have been around for 100 years and will be around for 100 years.
But the thing about those clubs is that most of them are run by people who can sustain those losses, aren't they? You know, they will sustain them and carry on doing. And the problem we have is that we don't attract the same sort of wealthy people to, or we do in some cases, but not in every case, to own and operate our clubs. So we've got to live within our means a little bit more, I suppose.
But then there's the argument as well. I mean, there's when someone with a lot of money comes in, it seems sometimes that there's certain people in the game that don't want them. I mean, the amount of criticism that Toronto get, and David Argyle, who we all know has a lot of money, and then there's certain sections of the game that would rather him seemingly not to be there. I just don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah, well, we've had a few of them. Marwan made a splash, didn't he? Derek Beaumont's been lost to the game, it would seem now as well. So
absolutely.
At least in the short term. We're just coming up right to the end. So quick recap on this weekend. Are we expecting any shocks this weekend? Any upsets? Middle eights, I think, is what we're
It wouldn't shock me if London were to beat Widnes, nor would it shock me if Halifax were to beat Toronto.
All right. You?
Don't see any shocks, but see a lot of really close games.
You reckon?
I think the one to watch is tonight, isn't it? Widnes versus London. I think it'll be an incredibly close game, and London might just sneak it, but Widnes will be desperate, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're not desperate. We're very happy with our last 3/4 of an hour work alongside Martyn, Mick, and to Matthew as well. Thanks very much, all three of you, for joining us today. And you can check out all you need to know, www.freesports, don't forget the final S, .tv. That's www.freesports.tv. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you in a week's time. Rugby League Back Chat is sponsored by TotalRL.com.